Pharisee, heresy, heresy, Pharisee. Jesus was a Pharisee, and that is no heresy. Jesus was an Hillel Pharisee. Yeah!
Welcome to the Pharisee Heresy podcast with Doctors Nathaniel Klein and Daniel Vaden. How you doing tonight, Doc?
Good. Thanks for coming back on to talk about Revelation.
Yes, I'm excited about it. Last week, we kind of dove into Revelation and talked about some of the symbolism used in Revelation. What were some of the highlights that you picked up on?
I think what I loved the best was the explanation from the historicist viewpoint of the seven churches. I thought that was very interesting. I didn't memorize it all, but you put up that little chart. People can check out the last video of when those churches would have had their period of time. And I think we're going to even go back eventually, right, and look at maybe what happened during those events. There's a lot of history, right?
Yeah, lots of history. I'm going to try to pull up that chart just so you can have it here on the screen if I can get to it here.
I talked about my favorite book, Zechariah, a little bit, so I was happy about that.
Zechariah is pretty awesome book, and I think we need to actually go back in.
You talked about the dual role of Christ being high priest and king. You talked about
the dual role of Christ. Yep.
How Revelation was.
Keep going. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, sorry. Revelation was written in code. We talked about how it was code, so the Romans, would let the manuscript leave Patmos, where John was imprisoned, because he couldn't be talking about Rome and the future of Rome. He had to put it in code so it could get out to the churches, right?
Yeah. So, John, if he's going to write about Rome, they're probably not going to let him write much about Rome if he's on this island. And just a refresher, Revelation was written around 96 CE during the time of Emperor Domitian. So I tell you what, one thing that I've kind of discovered in studying Revelation is you can't even begin to understand Revelation until you have a working understanding of the prophets before, like Daniel.
Yeah, you mentioned that last time.
Yeah, Zechariah, Jeremiah, all these guys that were prophesying around the time of the Babylonian captivity. And so I guess as a quick review, I could look over here at this statue. I'm not even sharing my screen yet, so I should probably do that.
Yeah, I don't see it yet.
Yeah, let's go ahead and I'll pull up my screen here, and that way you can see what I'm looking at. See that statue there?
Yes.
All right. So this was in Daniel chapter 2. This is the vision that God gave him about Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and this statue with the head of gold representing the Babylonian Empire. You'll read later in Daniel chapter 7 the description of this empire also being like a lion with wings of an eagle. And then you have the Medo-Persian Empire, characterized by a chest and arms of silver. So 2 arms representing both arms of that empire, the Medes and the Persians, which came together to conquer Babylon. And later in Daniel chapter 7, it's described as a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, and these 3 ribs were kingdoms that were subdued by this empire, and those were the Babylonians, Lydians, and Egyptians. And then it's also described in Daniel 8 as a ram with a short horn and a long horn, the short horn being Media, long horn being Persia. So then we get down to this section, which is the thighs of bronze, representing the Macedonians or the Greek Empire, also described as a leopard with 4 heads, those 4 heads and 4 wings being the 4 generals that
the Diadochi is the fancy name for them.
Yes,
I always thought was cool.
Diadochis. That's a good word to use. Makes you sound smart.
It means successors. The successors.
Okay, I didn't know that. Successors. That makes sense. So Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. So when you read Daniel chapter 8, you're going to see these phrases: King of the South, King of the North. This is referring to Ptolemy in Egypt, and the Ptolemaic dynasty, and Seleucus over Syria in the north, the Seleucid dynasty. And then after this empire, it gets conquered by the Romans, and the Romans are described as a terrible beast with 10 horns and iron teeth and bronze claws. Um, and so it also has 2 legs representing the eastern and western divisions.
Oh,
Yeah, and then turns into 2
so
feet.
obvious, but I've just never seen that before for some reason.
It's kind of cool when, after you go back and look, you put these pieces in and it makes sense. And these 2 feet are also then divided into 10 toes, and the feet and toes are a mixture of iron and clay. And so what we should expect is an empire with 2 divisions that at some point becomes 2 divisions split into 10 total that has a mixture of clay mixed in. And I believe that the clay represents Islam. And we'll see as we get through the trumpets where Islam actually comes in and conquers a lot of the Roman Empire and then becomes part of it. And so now to this day in Europe, you do have the Germanic peoples and the Islamic peoples that don't mix very well, but they are living in that region. A lot of people have tried to say that that the clay represents the Judeans, right? And so they, like the material preterists would say, oh, the clay represents Judeans in Rome, mixing with Rome, and but there's a really easy answer to prove that wrong. There's a really easy reason why that can't be the case, and that is because you don't see clay anywhere else in the statue mixed in. Yet Judah was part of this entire statue the whole time.
That's kind of like what we talked about last time. Like, to be Judea, you have to believe in God. It's not a bloodline thing. And Judea is the stone, right, that takes the statue out, right? It's the New Jerusalem. It's
Christ is, Yeshua
we're
is
grafted into that stone.
Yeah, exactly. We are grafted into that stone, and so this vision of the statue ends with this uncut stone that destroys this kingdom, and it says that you'll never see these again after that stone crushes it and then becomes a great mountain, the greatest mountain ever, and everything else is flattened. And so we talked about that symbolically just meaning that all their kingdoms are flattened. There are no other rival kingdoms that could sort of claim to have some sort of position of authority in any, independent of the great mountain of Messiah's kingdom in this millennial reign. So it's important we always go back to the understanding that we're given. And, Daniel wasn't given more kingdoms beyond these 4. These were the 4 until Messiah came. So if we can establish these 4, we know Rome is the last one, but we also know Rome has some evolutions, some changes that it goes through. From just being 2 legs to being 2 feet with 10 toes mixed with clay. We should expect to see something happen in the Roman Empire that weakens it, makes it brittle, that divides it up in some way and intermingles it with other peoples. And that is what we see in history.
My Nathaniel brain won't let this go, and I don't want to stop you, but since the 2 legs was kind of a revelation to me, being the Western and Eastern Roman Empire, is there 2 arms?
Yeah, so the 2 arms are the Medo-Persians.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
So it fits.
Now I can let that go. I can let that go and concentrate on this.
Well, because they both fit that way, it actually lends a lot more credibility to that understanding. So now that we've touched on that, let's go back and let's look at some things in Zechariah, and we're going to talk about what the 2 witnesses are in Revelation 11. A lot of people in the futurist paradigm are going to look at the 2 witnesses that prophesy for 1,260 days, and they're going to say, oh, that must be Moses and Elijah. In fact, it could be John, and John's actually still alive today in a cave somewhere, and he's just going to come out and start prophesying.
I was a good Left Behind reader back in the day and had the cassette tapes. They had the 2, Moses and Elijah. And
Was it Moses and Elijah
I
and
believe,
Left
yeah, and
Behind?
they were like
Yeah.
rippling, muscular guys, and
Nice.
calling down fire and stuff. And
Right?
Nikolai Carpathia was the Antichrist. Man,
That's
I
right.
ate it up, man. I loved it.
Oh
I
yeah.
watched the movies with what's his face. I can't remember.
Kirk Cameron?
Kirk Cameron, yeah. Oh, did you
Yes.
hear? I don't know if this is true, but I remember looking this up that they wanted to do a new Left Behind, and he didn't want to be
Really?
involved because he does not believe in the pre-trib rapture anymore.
That's hilarious. Now that is awesome. I love that. Um, all right. Well, so let's dive in and let's talk about Zechariah. And let's point out where he is and what time. So in this chapter 1, verse 1, it tells you that this is the second year of Darius. So Darius was the king of the Medes, and he joined up with Cyrus of the Persians, who Cyrus married his, I believe his daughter or granddaughter. I don't remember. But point is this is just 2 years after the Babylonians conquered. I'm sorry, the Medes and Persians conquered the Babylonians, and so this word came to Zechariah during this time, and he's just God's telling them to repent, to return to Him, and we're going to skip down and see this vision that he gives Zechariah. And you mentioned this last time. It made me want to go back and fit it in and kind of research a little bit more. But it's a vision of these horses, and he saw a man riding on a red horse. We're not going to get very deep into this, but I just want to touch on it. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the hollow, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. And he says, "What are these, my lord?" An angel said, "I will show you what they are." Then the man standing among the myrtle trees explained, "These are the ones the Lord has sent to patrol the earth." So I think this is an important phrase, is sent to patrol the earth. So they go to and fro in the earth to patrol and to report. And there's essentially function as Yahweh's messengers. And he says, the riders answered the angel of the Lord who was standing among the myrtle trees. "We have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth is at rest and tranquil." And so he says, how long, Yahweh, will you withhold mercy from Jerusalem, with you, which you've been angry these 70 years? So, um, and then God says, "I'm angry with the nations that are at ease, and I will return to Jerusalem, and there my house will be rebuilt." So Yahweh is angry, even though he punished Judah and Israel for their sins. He's angry with the nations that have done this and have enjoyed their peace and prosperity as they rule over his people. And he says, "I'm going to return with mercy, and a measuring line will be stretched out over Jerusalem." So a measuring line, or a plumb line, from which to build correctly.
So you think this time
He
of
says,
peace where everything's calm, it's during the Persian Empire, right? Because
yeah,
that's
so
when they got a break, right? Persia was kind of a good time. It allowed Zerubbabel and Ezra and Nehemiah to come back to Judea.
right. So Darius and Cyrus were the ones who initiated these decrees to allow the Israelites to go back and rebuild the temple and rebuild Jerusalem.
Want to hear a
And they,
Nathaniel conspiracy?
yeah, let's hear it.
I think Myrtle, because Hadassah is Esther's name, right?
Mm-hmm.
It means Myrtle.
Oh, yeah.
Her son, I think, is Darius. So he'd be half Jewish.
Interesting.
And that's different than common thought. And there's other reasons for that, but that's
Yeah.
just the Nathaniel conspiracy.
Which Darius? This Darius?
It wouldn't be Darius the Mede. No, I think it was,
Right. Yeah, because there's several Dariuses.
And
That's
even like if you look at Josephus's, names of the kings for the Persians, it's different than history. So there's a question of is there some years missing, and is there some kings that have different names or even two different titles? Like Artaxerxes means son of Xerxes.
right. As you're saying that makes me want to Hang on just a second.
More
I want to see if I
ammunition
can
for
bring it.
next time. You could look up.
I like that.
I have lots of Zechariah conspiracy theories. Like I said, it's my baby.
I knew I was going to do this. I minimized my navigation screen, and I never use Word. And now I'm using Word, and now I can't find my navigation. So that's great. But if here we go, headings. Now, we're going to go back and look. Tigris River, yeah.
I'm impressed at how organized you got all this.
Oh man, it's hardly.
You gotta have it. I've written a novel before. I didn't have all these little navigation things.
It's technology, man. Technology. The reason I want to find this is because, actually, it might be easier to just type in Xerxes and see if I can just find the chart that I'm looking for. Because as you make the point that there are different names of these different kings, here's a chart that I actually, when I was doing a deep dive into this, the Medo-Persian Empire, you got Darius the Mede,
Right.
and he joined up with Cyrus the Great.
That would have gone back to your two arms, right? So you'd have
Yes.
Darius the Mede joined with Cyrus to conquer Babylon.
Right. And so 538, 536, 536 was Darius' second year. That's when Zechariah got his vision. And then you have these other guys, and this is the area of a lot of debate and distortion, confusion amongst the history and scholars, because a lot of people don't know who this person was. A lot of people have different names for these Dariuses. And then you have Xerxes here, which I believe is when the book of Esther takes place. And so you have a time where there was opposition, and then eventually the Israelites were successful under Esther and Mordecai. Artaxerxes, you had the construction halted, but then it was continued again. So long story short is there's a lot of kings that actually took place during the time of the Medo-Persians, and it was a time, I think, of a mixture of some times of good prosperity where they were successful, and then sometimes where they were held back and almost killed, and so it was kind of like a little bit of both, it seems like. So, but getting back to Zechariah and what he saw, right. I don't know why I changed these settings on my computer, but it's making it hard on me here. There we go. All right, so
it also makes sense why, like in the book of Esther, why people like Mordecai would have stayed in Persia, because they had an influence to help Judea. They could do more good there than in Judea by allowing them to have more rights, essentially. Especially if you believe the narrative in Esther, where all across Persia, Jews were going to be killed by these Amalekites and Haman and all that. So it's like, yeah, we should stay close.
Well, it's kind of like when the modern state of Israel was created, which is a hugely controversial subject. A lot of Jews returned to Israel, but a lot of them stayed in the places where they were, like in New York and Miami, and these hot spots. But so, anyways, let's move on. So, the man standing among the myrtle trees. It's interesting that Yeshua stands among the lampstands as well in the heavenly vision and Revelation, and on the lampstand is also referred to as branches, like olive branches. So here you have like myrtle trees. Sometimes the word branch is actually tree. So this may be just a picture of Israel.
Myrtle is one of the 4 species that you wave at Sukkot.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
look at this.
Something.
Yeah, that's huge.
Picture
And
of the kingdom, right?
It very well could be symbolic of just a picture of Yeshua standing amongst the ecclesia, his people, right? And getting a report on the earth from these writers. And so, yeah, God's mad at these nations. And then he says, I looked up and saw 4 horns, and I said, what are these? He said, these are the horns that have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. And you mentioned this last time. So horns are symbolic of authority or power, like a king or a ruler of a nation or an empire. And so what were these empires or kings that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem? Well, we know that the Assyrians definitely scattered Israel. The Babylonians took the Judeans to exile. I don't know if that would be considered scattering, but maybe, yeah. I mean, and then you have the Medo-Persians that defeated the Babylonians, allowed them to return. The Greeks and the Romans. The Romans definitely scattered Israel big time. So I think, if you had to narrow it down to four, you could definitely say the Assyrians, and you could say the Babylonians had a hand in scattering because they're the ones that actually took them from the land.
Do you say this was leaders or empires? The horns.
Well, horns typically means leaders of an empire, yeah, or kings. So, without having to, technically name each person with precise detail, we get the idea that these are images or symbols of actual entities that did this.
Because I know you
And then
mentioned
Yahweh,
like Antiochus Epiphanes was a little horn, so I was wondering if he'd be one of these. Because
Yeah.
like Alexander the Great really didn't. I think he even like purposely left Judea alone. But
that's a great point. And
the
Antioch,
Seleucids definitely scattered.
yep, they definitely did. And yeah, they messed with the Maccabees. They desecrated the temple. They
made
They-
many
the-
flee back to Egypt, just like Nebuchadnezzar made many flee to Egypt.
Right.
They tried to start their
So-
own temple there.
Yeah, I mean, we could say Nebuchadnezzar, we could say Antiochus, we could say Titus, we could say what would be a Medo-Persian that might, I don't know, but four horns amongst this in this time.
Well, if we got five,
and you got to ask
kingdoms,
also,
we could say
like-
that the Medes and the Persians were the good time. We got Assyrians, Babylons, then we'd have Greece, and the Romans being the 4
Mm-hmm.
where the Persians was okay. It's like a break. It's like God's like, all right, we'll give you an empire break.
Right. But we also have to remember that this was given to Zechariah before they had returned. So if this is not a vision of future horns and it has to refer to horns that were already involved,
Okay.
then it would have to be those that pertain to Assyria and Babylon, which certainly could be true. So let's set that aside for now. Maybe we can figure all that out for one day. But then he said, the Lord showed me 4 craftsmen. What are these coming to do? And he replied, these are the horns that scattered Judah, so that no one could raise his head. But the craftsmen have come to terrify them and throw down these horns of the nations that have lifted up their horns against the land of Judah to scatter it. All right. So the craftsmen terrify and throw down these horns. So these 4 craftsmen are basic. I think that they're angels or principalities that then terrify and throw down the horns of the nations. So what I mean by that is that oftentimes you have a king or something like that's inspired by God to, or stirred up to go and attack so and so. So essentially, God in His sovereignty is able to stir up these kings and cause them to do something, and then He'll turn right back around and He'll punish them. And He uses these nations because they're wicked, but He also uses them to discipline His own people. So the horns that God even used to scatter Judah will now be terrified by the 4 craftsmen. Okay, so we're getting some context here in Zechariah about how Judah has been scattered, and now God is going to raise up 4 craftsmen to terrify the nations that have done this. All right, so we're going to go to Zechariah 2, and God is talking about a man with a measuring line in his hand, and he said to measure Jerusalem. And where else do we see a man with a measuring line? We see it in Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48, and we see it in Revelation where he's measuring the temple and the outer courts. And so this measuring line or plumb line, when you create the temple, you use the capstone from which to measure all your plumb lines for placing all the other stones. So now we got a measuring line, and I'm going to say that I believe the measuring line on a very spiritual level refers to Yeshua, the capstone, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So it's basically this messianic idea of God is going to bring joy and gladness to the daughter of Zion once again. So daughter of Zion, in being heavenly Jerusalem. So not just the physical land, but the daughter of Zion being all of the children promised to Abraham and Sarah, right? So
that'd be us, right?
then
Or the daughter.
that would be us. That would be us.
Ecclesia.
And the ecclesia, the called out ones, the congregation. So now this is where it gets juicy. Did we talk about Zechariah 3 last time and the two
you mentioned
offices?
The two offices, how they're the two witnesses that Revelation is talking about, and it's his high priesthood and his kingship.
Okay. So we did go there. Gotcha.
And you were talking about Joshua and the garments he was wearing, and but he also had a crown. He had priestly garments and a crown.
Okay. Yeah. So here now, O high priest Joshua, you and your companions seated before you, who are indeed a sign, for I'm going to bring my servant the branch. So Joshua is a sign of something spiritual, something to come future about this great mountain that God will create, the eternal messianic millennial kingdom. And so I'm going to bring my servant the branch. You're a sign of this. What you're doing today is representative of something that's going to happen in the future. So he's going to bring my servant the branch. Branch can also be used for the word tree. So see the stone I've set before you. On that stone are 7 eyes. I will engrave on it an inscription, declares Yahweh, and remove the iniquity of this land in a single day. So in what time did Yahweh do something that would remove the iniquity of the land in a single day? Well, when he fulfilled Daniel's 70 weeks, when Yeshua died on the cross for us and paid the redemption price for all of mankind. He's coming as the servant, the branch. And on that day, declares the Lord of hosts, you will each invite your neighbor to sit under your own vine and fig tree. You go to Micah, we see this phrase, sit under your own vine and fig tree, as a reference to the messianic kingdom or the millennial kingdom.
I feel like this is easy for us as Christians, but how do those in Judaism not see my servant, the branch, even the name Joshua, Yehoshua, Yeshua?
Right. Well, if we go to Zechariah,
suffering servant character. I don't know. Sorry. That's off topic.
That's good though. We go to Zechariah 6, and we see that he says, make an ornate crown and set it on the head of the high priest Joshua, son of Jehozadak. Tell him this is what Yahweh of armies or hosts says. Here is a man whose name is the branch, and he will branch out from his place and build the temple of Yahweh. Okay, so he doesn't say here's a man whose name means the branch, because Joshua's name does not mean branch. It means Yahweh's salvation. Yeah. Right. But here's a man whose name is the branch. So his name is the branch. Joshua is the branch. And we know Yeshua is the Aramaic form of Joshua. Jesus is the Latinized English form of Yeshua. So what he's actually saying is the branch, the Messiah, who's going to establish this great mountain, shares the name with this guy, Joshua, who is a sign of the branch to come. And he's doing all these things, building this temple with Zerubbabel, and it's all foreshadowing the ultimate fulfillment of that.
Sorry, I had a little smirk on my face because I was just thinking about in the intro video to all these. One of the other Pharisees, I put on his shirt, grafted in branch, but I made it like look funny because I wanted they grafted in like biatch, you know.
Oh,
It's just now you're talking about branch and like laughing at myself.
that's
Like
great.
no one probably notices it but me.
Oh man.
So, sorry, continue.
Well, in the same chapter, you see these strong horses patrolling the earth. So he saw 4 chariots between 2 mountains of bronze, red, black, white, and dappled horses, 4 horses. These are the 4 spirits of heaven going forth from their station. Yeah, and they're patrolling the earth. So the point is that God has his spiritual forces that act as messengers and do things. They can bring warfare, they can bring judgment, they can bring famine, plague, all these things. So we're going to just touch on Zechariah 4 before we leave Zechariah. And remember, here we saw that Zechariah was given a vision of a gold lampstand with 7 lamps on it. And there are 2 olive trees beside it, one on the right, one on the left.
Yeah, this was our question
Okay.
last time. Or my question was that
Right.
why is there only
And why are there
one
2
olive tree in Zechariah, but there's 2 in Revelation? What is it, 11?
Yeah. So you've got 2 olive trees and 1 lampstand here. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah, backwards. Sorry.
Right.
Two,
In Revelation, you've got 2 olive trees and 2
dos,
lampstands.
Dos menorahs.
Yes. And remember here, before Zerubbabel, O great mountain, you will become a plain. Then he will bring forth the capstone, accompanied by shouts of great
It's very
grace.
exactly what you said before. Everything's going to be flattened.
Yes, yeah. And we see in Zechariah 14 that this literally happens when Yeshua places his feet on the Mount of Olives, splits the earth, and flattens all the land before it.
Now, is that a end of the 70 weeks thing, or is that a future event?
That is definitely future because none of that has happened.
Still a mountain there. As far as we know, Jerusalem's still a hill.
Yeah, so I don't know what I just did there, but we're going to go to Zechariah 14. Yahweh will go out to fight against those nations as he fights on a day of battle. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. Mount of Olives will be split in 2, form a great valley. Half the mountain moved to the north, half to the south. And Yahweh will come, all the holy ones with him.
I think this is
Living
like
water
the
flows
only
from
reference
Jerusalem.
to the Mount of Olives in the Old Testament too. I might be
Is
wrong.
it?
I might be wrong about that, but it is. It's an odd thing. But in the New Testament, yeah, it's it's very familiar to us.
Oh yeah. And then you have this living water going to the eastern sea, the Dead Sea, and then the western sea, the Mediterranean Sea. Summer and winter alike, and only Yahweh will become king over all the earth. So this is not something that's happened yet. This is the future final day. This is Armageddon. Okay, so this is the final bowl of the 7th trumpet of the 7th seal when this happens. And here we have Jerusalem turned into a plain. I'm sorry, the land from Rimmon will be turned into a plain, but Jerusalem will be raised up. And then what you have is a plague strikes peoples who warred against them.
Will Jerusalem be raised up because that's going to be the new Jerusalem setting down?
Well, New Jerusalem doesn't happen until after the 1,000-year reign. The 1,000 years are up. So this is the beginning of the 1,000-year reign, the millennial kingdom. So New Jerusalem doesn't come down out of heaven until after that. This is the great
That's
mountain.
Sean Griffin, the Sean Griffin in me. He places it pre.
I see. Does he kind of place it at the same time, like he puts the New Jerusalem and Millennium together?
The day of the Lord, he says that the New Jerusalem, it's coming down with Jesus. Essentially, he
Okay.
goes,
And-
he makes the land a plain for it to set down, and then the millennial reign starts.
Okay. So he sees the making the land a plain as a reason to bring this cube down geographically.
It made
And
sense. He's like, oh, he's consecrating the land and all that. And like he waits 7
Sure.
days for Jerusalem to come down, so it's like purified essentially.
interesting, because if you wait 7,000 days, that's when the New Jerusalem actually comes down. The Sabbath after the Sabbath of the world is the 8th day, and that New Jerusalem is the eternal state, which is everything is there's no temple because everything is a temple. So really, the consecration of the earth takes place over 7,000 years. Each
And that would,
day of creation
that would
representing
fit
1,000
good
years.
with the end of Zechariah 14 here, where it says the nations come during the pilgrim feasts, or at least Sukkot. It mentions Sukkot, that they come to celebrate it at Jerusalem during
Right.
this millennial reign.
So all the people that warred against Jerusalem at Armageddon are destroyed. But then there's implication that there will be survivors from the nations that came against Jerusalem. So there will be active people that are active in warfare that are destroyed by his fire, and then there will be survivors from these nations who may have been participant or just an accessory to crime. You know what I'm saying? Who are subjugated under the rod of iron type of reign that Messiah is said to embody, and they will come up and go year after year to worship the King. And if any nation does not celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, then they do not get any rainfall. Rain will not fall on them.
Makes sense. Like maybe even like the Muslims, like they might know that like this Antichrist, whoever, or Satan, is not good. You know, the rest of the world will follow them. So maybe, you know, they have a same link to us with Abraham. You know,
Right.
Through what's his face, Ishmael. So maybe,
Yeah, and it's hard to know exactly what people groups will, but it does say all nations will come against Jerusalem, and it's thinking about it, I've always thought, well, how will the United States turn against Israel and come against Jerusalem, and but what you see today, and this gets into the topic of who is a Jew and what is Israel talking about, what is Jerusalem, okay? But what I'm seeing more and more and more in Christian circles, and it's all over Twitter right now, is people that are denying the Holocaust happened. Tucker Carlson just interviewed a guy that basically said that that Churchill was the nemesis of World War II, and that Hitler was, for lack of better words, subject to circumstances, and the circumstances caused him to do some bad things, but he was trying to do the right thing, or something like that. And there's also an increase in people talking about bringing back the Crusades and how they would love to join in on a new crusade. With they make these AI generated graphics of these crusaders in this cool armor, and they're all muscular and beefy, and like as if they're going to be some cool warrior. But so now I'm starting to see this is happening in Christianity, both in Protestant and in Catholic circles. This rise in anti-Semitism. You're seeing the Khazar theory, where people are trying to identify Ashkenazi Jews as fake Jews who are truly of the synagogue of Satan and rule the world secretly. And if anybody really studies the Khazarians, you'll find out Ashkenazis did not come from Khazaria. They came from the Rhineland, Germany. And so they settled in a land that was known as Ashkenaz. And that's where they got that name. So people like to say that Ashkenazis are sons of Japheth, because in the Bible, one of Japheth's sons was Ashkenaz. But that's completely separate from where Ashkenazi Jews derive their name. They did not derive that name from lineage. They derived it from the name of a location where they settled, which happened to have been called Ashkenaz. So the point is people take little nuggets and then they build things that are disconnected off of them and make giant theories about how now if you're an Ashkenazi Jew, you're actually the synagogue of Satan, which then justifies this idea of fighting them or eradicating them, right? I've seen memes pop up about why did so many nations kick the Jews out? It's always about how they're liars and stealers and thieves and all these things. But that topic is a diversion from what we're talking about, but it just so happens to be relevant and pertinent, to the things happening.
Right. It's almost like the conservative movement. Like, yes, you're right about some things, but it's like everything you're saying, it's going to be a very convincing line. Like, how was Rome reignited? Like in your viewpoint, it has to come back to power, right? Like this temporal power will be restored, essentially, that they had before, where evil was being carried out. We were talking about text because a couple episodes ago we talked about the Waldensians. It was it stuck with me for several days, just thinking about how could they do this evil, these people, these soldiers, not just the papacy, but these soldiers. How could they carry out such, not just murdering people, but all that sick stuff?
How could a human being ever go to that level? And it's complete. It's the beast nature. It's a person who goes the opposite of sanctification, and they become a beast. Like Nebuchadnezzar was cursed by God to walk on his feet and grew hair and nails and acted like a beast until God delivered. It was like he was showing him, this is what you will turn into, if you continue down this path. And yeah, there's the two paths you can go. You can go the spiritual circumcision, where God cuts off the flesh and you transcend the flesh and become a child of God and live with him forever, or you just become a beast and then you're destroyed one day. And so some people go that route really fast, or they're raised that way by horrible, abusive, satanic families, and unfortunately never escape it. So again, that's another topic for another day.
I was just gonna say, I think it was Owen Benjamin talking about the Jews, they control the media and they're just controlling everything and they're turning us all against each other. So there's that narrative, and there's this, let's restart Rome kind of thing. There is these Facebook pages, they have all these quotes. I even share them sometimes, and then you laugh at me. I'm like, Daniel's probably right. Shouldn't be sharing Roman Marcus Aurelius quotes and all.
No,
because it's let's get our Crusader helmets on. It's like that.
Right.
There is an attraction there for a lot of us.
It gets glorified. Yeah.
It's almost like there's this false enemy, right? It's like the liberals and their transgender agendas and LGBT stuff that we want to fight against.
Right. It's made me think, when is the appropriate time to fight? And the only appropriate time to engage in physical warfare is in the defense of yourself or the needy and helpless. That's the instruction that we're really given. The only time in the Bible when it's sanctioned is when the people of Israel lived in a theocracy with the literal presence of God in their camp, telling them, go to war or don't go to war. And so what the papacy did was replace that, and the Pope claimed to sit in the place of God, and so he could command them to go to battle and do whatever they wanted, slaughter people or whatever. And so in some cases you may make the case that, something was justified because they were defending against a hostile attack. But, we look at the transgender agenda, and we need to spiritually fight those things and attack them on a spiritual level with the truth and with the gospel. But it doesn't give us a justification to literally engaging in crusades, So we touched on Revelation 11, the two witnesses, and we talked about they will prophesy for 1,260 days, and that these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. So I want to touch on this for a second, and I believe the reason it might be that there are two lampstands here compared to Zechariah's one lampstand is because it represents the two comings of Messiah. And so what we actually have is the rabbis have a belief in two messiahs. In some ways, they actually have three messiahs, but they definitely have a Messiah ben David, which is that kingly Messiah, which was the one they were expecting in the first century. Hey, go and conquer the Romans. Which of us is going to sit on your right and left? And then they have the concept of the
That's why Peter had a sword.
Messiah.
He was ready.
Right.
I have a theory that's even why Judas betrayed Jesus, because like, let's get this revolution started.
Yeah. It's interesting. He was clamoring for getting, if that's the case, clamoring for getting the revolution started. Yet he becomes an archetype for an antichrist. And so the thing about the term antichrist is not so much against, but opposite or false in place of Messiah. So false anointed one. And so really the false anointed one is not some atheist or external threat, but probably an internal threat that we see that seats itself in the place of God, calls itself something that it's not. So when you call yourself a Jew, but you're actually false, then you're of the synagogue of Satan, masquerading as an angel of light, but you're a wolf in sheep's clothing. So when John says, those who call themselves Jews but are not, that are of the household of Satan, this is not about saying Ashkenazi Jews are the problem. John was using the term Jew as a reference to his own people, his own faith. Like if you and I were to say, those people who call themselves Christians but are not, we can all point out those examples where somebody misrepresents Christ, claims to be a Christian, but they're really working against what God is teaching. So these guys, so you have the two messiahs. You got the Messiah ben David, the king, and you have Messiah ben Joseph, which is the suffering servant. And you remember Joseph was thrown into a pit, left for dead, but rose from the pit and then provided salvation for all his brothers, for all of Israel, by saving them during the famine and bringing them all to Egypt. So you have the suffering servant that brings salvation, and you have a reigning king. And so this Messiah is one lampstand, but appears twice. So the rabbis thought it would be two messiahs. What they didn't conceive of, that it would be the same Messiah coming twice. Okay, so here we have now a vision of one lampstand was Zechariah, and with John, the revelation of two lampstands, and I believe possibly indicating two appearances, two comings of Messiah. First is Messiah ben Joseph, second is Messiah ben David when he comes as king. Now, I think another key we talked about last time, the two offices of the witnesses being king and priest, which also represents the ordinances of God. The decrees of the king is Torah. So how do we define a believer, a part of the ecclesia who Satan is trying to kill? Well, that is those who keep the commandments of God, so the ordinances of the king, and the testimony of Yeshua, which is the gospel, that Yeshua, our high priest, redeemed mankind. So those are the two witnesses, the Torah
the dragon
and
goes
faith.
to make war against those who hold
That
the
is who the
testimony of
dragon
Yeshua and keep the commandments of God.
goes to make war with.
There you go.
The dragon was enraged at the woman and went to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Yeshua. So, who are these witnesses? They are the church, or let me just say the ecclesia, because we are a holy nation. We are a royal priesthood. Royal meaning king, priesthood meaning priest. So we as the collective body of Messiah, the ecclesia, are representatives of Messiah, who embodies king and priest. So we become a royal priesthood. So we act as the two witnesses upon the earth, prophesying for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now,
So these two witnesses, would you say, because since it has two identifiers, like upholding Jesus, upholding his kingship, but also acting as a priest, which is keeping Torah as part of that.
so I would say keeping Torah is a testimony to the king and obeying his ordinances. And having faith in Yeshua is a testimony to the priest who died for our sins to provide redemption for mankind. You see, so now what you have is during this 1,260 years of persecution under the papacy, both Christians and Jews were persecuted. And not all the Christians kept the Torah. A lot of them did. And Jews, not all of them, they pretty much kept the Torah, but not all of them believed in Messiah. So a faithful witness embodies both of these. The true ecclesia, embodies both. But I think there's still room to say that even non-believing Jews serve as a witness to the true God, and even non-Torah keeping Christians serve as a witness to the true God, although they don't fulfill the matter as established until they do both, because a matter is established on the testimony of two witnesses. So the truth is really in faith in Yeshua and obeying the commands of our God. We cannot have one without the other and truly establish the truth of the matter. But it doesn't discount the fact that the Jews honor and try their best to keep the Torah. It doesn't discount that a lot of Christians who disregard the Torah because of what they've been taught have faith in Messiah. Because a lot of these Jews that don't have faith in Messiah, the reason they don't have faith is because of what they were taught is that Jesus did away with the Torah. So how could they accept that if that is what Christianity teaches?
And they would say, we
right?
have faith in Messiah. We just don't think he's come yet. It's like they believe in Messiah. They believe in this.
Right.
Probably very similar to what we do, like what he's supposed to do.
So even today, a non-believing Jew, in some way or fashion, still holds a degree of witness. And let me just say this: you talk about the modern state of Israel. What was it, 1948 when it was established?
Yeah.
So there's significance to that. And you think about, like, when was the last time that there was a nation of Israel? Well, that would have been in 70 CE, before the temple was destroyed. You know what I'm saying?
I think they retook the land for like 20 years somewhere in the Middle Ages. I can't remember exactly, but it was a very short period of time.
Like they ruled, they took Jerusalem and ruled there for a little while.
Yeah, I think they took Jerusalem. It was with the help of, I can't remember who it was. I think it was like the Persians again, but like the later Persians.
Yeah.
You have to look into it. Let me know.
So, I mean, you look at the time where the Israelites lived in the land as a kingdom. They weren't always faithful to Yahweh. It was always a mixture of good and evil. It was always the faithful and the unfaithful in varying numbers and proportions. And even when they were taken into captivity, it was the same story. So in prophetic terms, we shouldn't discount the establishment of the nation of Israel because they're not all 100% embodying the true witness of faith in Messiah and the commandments, right? It doesn't discount a prophetic significance of there being a nation state, because God's promises are, yes, they're to Abraham's descendants, and the promise is of faith, and true Israel is of faith, but there's also promise connected to the land as well. And there's a lot of significance to that land. And the only time that we talk about what the earth is in Revelation and all these prophecies, the earth refers to the region surrounding the land the covenantally promised borders of Israel, right? So America is not and will never be Israel, but Israelites can live in America because we have faith, because we are part of spiritual part of Israel. So, all right, so 1,260 days. We're going to see that same number in Revelation 12, showing that is referring to the same people. Here, a time, times, and half a time. And then we'll see it up here, 1,260 days. So who are these people? Well, we have the great sign in heaven, which was Messiah's birth. The red dragon, we're going to skip over that, and we're going to see here, then the dragon stood before the woman ready to devour her child. So Satan working through Herod to kill the Messiah, but she gave birth
which
to
episode
Yeshua.
it was. It might have been our first episode where you talked about that and you showed it on Stellarium, his birth and everything.
Mm-hmm.
First or second episode. If you
I think
want to see that.
I think
the
it
star
was
sign,
yeah.
Everything that Revelation falls.
Yeah, we went in Stellarium and showed this sign occurring in September 11th of 3 BC. And we can also show, if you go back to around 5000 BC, you can see the red dragon in the northern wheel of stars that occupied a third of the sides of the north, and so we'll skip that and we can go back to that and watch that video. But
say we,
here you have
you, because you did all the work.
Yes, will you help me out? So Herod tried to kill Messiah, but failed, and she gave birth to a son who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And Yeshua was caught up to God. He ascended. And then the woman fled into the wilderness, and God prepared a place for her to be nourished 1,260 days. Now, in the wilderness, you're not thriving, but God prepared for them to be nourished. Just like the two witnesses were not thriving during the persecution where they were driven out of their homelands and massacred and persecuted and fought for the integrity of the word of God, okay? But they were nourished. The faithful would survive and a remnant would remain. And you see this same story spoken of again down here, starting in verse 13, just said a different way. The dragon pursued the woman who gave birth to the child. She fled on the wings of an eagle into the wilderness where she was nourished for a time, times and half a time. And the dragon tried to overtake with spewing water like a river. Water like a river refers to violent military force. And then the earth opened up its mouth, and dragon was enraged to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus, of Yeshua. So who are the children? The children are, here we go. That's what I was looking for. The children are the ecclesia, us, children of faith, born from above. You can see some scripture references here on the screen. So the woman in the physical was Mary, who gave birth to the child, Yeshua. But in the spiritual, referring to the promise to Abraham and Sarah and the heavenly Jerusalem, Yeshua in the spiritual is the promised seed given to Abraham and Sarah. And we are children of that promise. And so we are the rest of her seed. So remember, that woman was crowned with 12 stars, and those are the children of Israel. So that's the woman is identified as basically Sarah, or heavenly Jerusalem. And so now we can see that the children are the same as the two witnesses, right? The children in Revelation 12 are the same as the two witnesses in Revelation 11, are the same as the two branches in Zechariah 3 and 4, are the same as the two branches in Ezekiel, when Ezekiel says that Messiah will unite the sticks of Ephraim and Judah,
right?
And make them one in his hand, and he will rule and reign over them. So now you also have a witness to the two witnesses being Ephraim, which is Joseph, and Judah.
Have you looked at the two staffs in Zechariah? I can't remember. I don't think they're connected, but
I have not. Maybe on next episode.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so you're familiar with the two branches of Ezekiel's prophecy? Yeah, so he makes them one in his hand, and there talks about there being an enmity between. Um, let's see if we can just find it here. Enmity between Judah and Ephraim, and Ephraim refers to basically the lost tribes of the house of Israel, and
And the Assyrian captivity. So the
yeah,
whole northern kingdom was considered Ephraim. So 10 tribes.
here we go, Ezekiel 37:19. And we'll pull it up here, make this big, and so Ezekiel's given a vision of the valley of dry bones, and can these bones come to life? I will cause breath to enter you and bring you back to life. Okay. It became a vast army. And he says, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. We have been cut off, we're perished. This is what he says. I'll open your graves and bring you up, bring you back to the land. Okay. And he says, take a single stick and write on it belonging to Judah and to the Israelites associated with him. Then take another stick and write on it belonging to Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and to all the house of Israel associated with him. Then join them together in one stick so they may become one in your hand. So, and he says, I will take them and make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and one king rule over all of them. There will no longer be two nations, and never be divided into two kingdoms. David, my king, will be over them, so occupying the office, the kingly office, and I want to find the scripture verse about the enmity between the two. But these two kingdoms were when the northern tribes, the 10 tribes that you mentioned, which collectively became known as Ephraim, were taken into captivity by the Assyrians. Prior to that, okay, so let's go back to Jeroboam
I
and
know what you're
Rehoboam.
talking about, where it's talking about, like, Ephraim shall not vex
Yeah.
or whatever, Judah and Judah, yeah.
Yeah, harass, I think might be the word.
Yeah, I was
Maybe
going to
that's
say,
it.
it sounds like an Isaiah 11 thing.
Here we go. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will collect the scattered of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Then the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and the adversaries of Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will no longer envy Judah, nor will Judah harass Ephraim.
And in the beginning of this chapter, doesn't it not talk about the seven spirits?
The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. Yep. A spring up and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. It's all over the place.
It's branching out. Oh.
Yes. So, just for the listeners, going back to the time of David's son Solomon, who became king, and after him, the kingdoms split between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. I think it was Rehoboam of Judah and Jeroboam of Israel. Israel being the north. The north was taken to Assyria. The south lived a little longer, 100 more years, and then they were taken to Babylonian captivity. And then it was the Judahites who returned to the land to rebuild Jerusalem. The Israelites taken to Assyria, amalgamated with the people. Some returned back, but a lot of them mixed with the Samaritans, and that's why there was this enmity between the Jews and Samaritans, and that's why the Samaritans have their own Samaritan Pentateuch, their own place where they did worship. And so they looked a lot like the Jewish peoples, but they were these 10 lost tribes. And so Yeshua said, I've come only for the lost tribes. He has special commission to bring them back together, to make them one. And he told the Samaritan woman that, there will be those who worship in spirit and truth. They'll no longer worship at this mountain. They'll worship in spirit and truth. So part of the fulfillment of this Ezekiel prophecy is happening right now. If we can overcome our enmity towards each other and get over, the us versus them mentality of Jews versus Israelites or Jews versus Christians, and come together in faith and in love. So that's the Ezekiel prophecy, and remember, even these two sticks are representative of Messiah, because the scepter will not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. So until Messiah comes to rule and reign with the rod of iron is basically what that's talking about. And then Joseph or Ephraim is representative of Joseph. So now the two sticks also have the two offices, because Joseph is Ephraim, which is the suffering servant, a form of Messiah, and Judah is the line of kings, or David. So that's the kingly office.
Let's think about the Hasmoneans there. Like, they didn't even want to join because Hyrcanus the first conquered Samaritans, conquered Edom. Didn't want Samaritans because you had to be circumcised to pay taxes and join the army. So he forcibly converted Edom over the Samaritans. Chose them, and that's where Herod comes from. So he chose to reap what you sow there.
Wow.
Allowed him to be, essentially, I'm Jewish. I'm forcibly, my family was forcibly circumcised. Antipater was his father, who would have been forcibly circumcised, and gave him a foothold to be king.
So you're saying that because of the animosity that existed, that's why Herod took power.
In Jesus' day, they didn't even want to. Jews didn't travel through Samaria; they would go all the way around to go for the pilgrim feast. I think if they lived in the Galilee, like a lot of the Pharisees did, they would go around. They would go east of the Jordan.
East, yeah, that's right.
Use my brain; it's hard.
That's the route Yeshua took, I think, when he made his triumphal entry, when he was going to the pilgrimage feast.
It'd been faster to go
came from the east.
But yeah.
Right. Interesting. And that's anyways, I won't get into that. So one last thing. No, that was a really good point. I had no idea about that. But it just shows the truth of that, the enmity and hostility. So we're going to get to Revelation 5 and see.
A point for the Pharisees here, they did not want that. They did not want Edom forcibly converted. So just, I got to defend the Pharisees at every point I can. So
I agree, because they get hammered on by people, unrightly so.
They were pretty okay with other cultures, but Samaritans, they did not like. They'd rather someone be an atheist than a Samaritan. And that goes way back. There's more history there of what they did.
The Pharisees did.
Well, both the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and Judaism in general did not like Samaritans because of the whole thing with Antiochus Epiphanes. They pretended to essentially be Gentiles. They named their temple.
That's right.
Jupiter Hellenus.
When Antiochus was like on his rampage, they were like, "Oh yes, we are not
Arabs.
We worship the pagan gods. We're Arabs.
This is not Yahweh's temple.
So
Jupiter's temple."
Right. Yeah.
Literally what they did. They just gave into the Hellenization. They just rolled over and.
Right. I mean, imagine that your families and friends are being slaughtered for standing up for their faith, and then the church down the road, when the government comes, they're like, "Oh yeah, no, we're with you guys. We don't know those people at that church. We don't worship their God." You'd be pretty mad that like they sold out, and and then basically said, "Yeah, go attack them because they serve Yahweh." And
then they went all.
So I mean, it makes sense.
The Maccabees went all Phineas on the Samaritans after that, and like killed a lot of them. So there was back and forth there. So it fits. It fits that Ezekiel passage, or no, it was Isaiah 11, where the animosity between them. So there was the back and forth.
So Revelation 5, I saw a scroll in the right hand of the one seated on the throne. If you think of the temple, and if you think of Yeshua sitting at the ark, and he's looking east towards the entrance of the temple. And his right hand would be where the menorah sits,
Okay.
right? And his left hand would be the table of presence or showbread. Right in front of him would be the altar of incense for the prayers of the saints.
Right.
The 12 loaves of showbread being the 12 tribes, and the 7 candlesticks being the 7 spirits of Yahweh, the 7 churches or ecclesia, the branches, all the symbolism there. But so he sees it had writing on both sides of the scroll and was sealed with 7 seals. I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look inside it. And I began to weep bitterly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or look inside it. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Okay. And I saw a lamb who appeared to have been slain, standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which represent the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the scroll from the right hand of the one seated on the throne. All right, so the 7 horns and 7 eyes. I don't know if we talked about this last time, but the 7 eyes are likened unto the 7 planets, visible planets, the 7 spirits.
Yeah, you mentioned Josephus and the menorah.
Right.
And what he described, the 7 planets and the sun and the moon and all that. You went deep on that.
Yes, and the point of the planets was not to say that the planets themselves are significant, but they're a symbol of what the planets do, which is they serve as heavenly messengers when you're reading the Mazzaroth, this timepiece that God gave us. So if the 7 churches represent, or if the 7 lights or torches on these 7 branches represent 7 eyes or 7 planets, it's saying they act as messengers that go into and fro in the earth, patrol the earth, and are supposed to represent Yahweh. And so 7 horns, we talked about positions of authority, rulership. And remember, Messiah says that in some of these places, he says, if you don't repent, if you don't do the deeds you did at first, I'm going to remove your lampstand. I'm going to remove your position of authority or influence. All right, so we see the 7 churches or the ecclesia as a whole, because remember, this wasn't written to every church. It was only written to 7 churches in Asia Minor. Is it describing a geographical thing, or is it describing something that applies to the entire body of believers over 7 chronological periods of time, each chronological period having a certain disposition, and God saying, this is what you're facing, this is what you're tempted by, you need to remain strong, repent. If you don't, I'll remove your influence. I'll remove your lampstand. But there are always those who remain faithful. All right. So now we're going to go and we talk about the scroll that he's able to open. Why isn't he unable to open it? It's because it's sealed and only one that's worthy can open it. So it's what it is a title deed to the earth, and which was lost when Adam sinned and death entered the picture and Satan became the ruler of the world and the prince of the power of the air, the ruler of this age. And so only one could cast out the prince of darkness, and he was found worthy to do that when he died, resurrected, and ascended and took his throne in heaven. And so it's in heaven that he begins to open the seals and open this title deed to the earth, and with its stipulations and conditions that would begin to play out over time. So it says here, he took the scroll, 4 living creatures and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, and they sang a new song. Worthy are you to take the scroll and open its seals, because you were slain,
Gotta sing it.
and by your blood you purchased for God those from every tribe, tongue, people, and nation. What was that?
Said you gotta sing it.
Yeah. Go for it.
I got another one.
And you have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God. Here again, we see the 2 offices, kingdom and priests,
Yep.
and they future tense, will reign upon the earth. So this is key because we are a kingdom. Christ established and built a spiritual kingdom when he first came. But we will reign on the earth. So those that say the millennium occurred back in the first century, it did not, because these are two different things. The spiritual kingdom that cannot be observed, but it's in your midst, is different from the physical kingdom, which we will actually reign in. Do you get what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
So this is a key verse that creates a distinction between the two very clearly. Now, it was by his blood purchased that he purchased all peoples and all nations. And so where do we see this in the prophets? Well, if you go to Jeremiah, this was the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So this was right before the Medes. I'm sorry, this is right before Nebuchadnezzar took over Israel, took over Jerusalem. Okay, and so the army of the king of Babylon was besieging Jerusalem. So there was a time where Nebuchadnezzar was just going to make the Israelites basically pay tribute and be a vassal state, but Zedekiah broke his arrangements and led to the besieging of Jerusalem. And now Jeremiah is surrounded by Babylonian armies, and he's imprisoned, and he receives a prophecy from God. And God says, and even Zedekiah was like, "Why are you prophesying? You know, we're about to be captured. I'm going to give up, and the king of Babylon is going to capture it, and you know, no one's going to escape. We're going to be handed to Babylon. So why are you even prophesying?" And Jeremiah said that Yahweh came to him and told him, "Behold, Hanamel, the son of your uncle Shalom, is coming to you to say, buy for yourself my field in Anathoth, for you have the right of redemption to buy it." Then, as Yahweh had said, my cousin Hanamel came to me in the courtyard of the guard and urged me, "Please buy my field in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, for you own the right of inheritance and redemption. Buy it for yourself." Then I knew this is a word from the Lord. Why? Why in the world would Jeremiah buy a field and redeem a field, knowing that he was about to be taken into captivity for 70 years and never even be able to utilize this field, right? So he's like, okay, this is prophetic. Yahweh's doing this for something in the future, to show us, to teach us something. So he bought the field from his cousin, paid 17 shekels for it, signed and sealed the deed, called in witnesses, and weighed out the silver on the scales. I took the deed of purchase, the sealed copy with its terms and conditions, as well as the open copy, and I gave this deed to Baruch, son of Neriah, son of Maaseiah, in the sight of my cousin Hanamel, and the witnesses who were signing the purchase agreement, and all the Jews sitting in the courtyard of the guard. In their sight I instructed Baruch, "This is what Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, says. Take these deeds, both the sealed copy and the open copy deed of purchase, and put them in a clay jar to preserve them for a long time. For this is what Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, says, houses, fields, and vineyards will again be bought in this land." Now, we know that this did happen, that houses, fields, and vineyards were bought in this land when they returned. But Jeremiah did this prophetically and had this sealed deed placed in clay jars to preserve them. So where else do we see
It's a
clay jars?
It's a band.
Jars of clay. Yeah, that's right. He's talking about the band.
I knew it.
2 Corinthians 4. Let's see. So we are basically proclaiming the gospel as a witness. In verse 7, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show this surpassingly great power is from God and not from us. Okay, so what's the treasure in jars of clay? So the jars of clay are bodies that will break and wear out, but when they do, we got a treasure inside, and that is eternal redemption, eternal life, because we've been redeemed by the Messiah, the Lamb who was able to open the seal. And we are sealed. Let's see here.
In my office, there's a jar of clay that's signed by jars of clay,
That's awesome.
as well as a trumpet by the Supertones, and there's a shoe for Switchfoot.
Really?
90s Christian bands, early 2000s.
That's probably worth something.
I doubt it. Maybe Switchfoot. Jars of Clay's still around.
Here we go. Ephesians 4:30. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, in whom you are sealed for the day of redemption. So there's a day of redemption coming. So we go back to that Revelation, and now we see that's what this seal that Yeshua is opening up in the heavens. It's the redemption seal, the title deed to all of creation. And then by the way, every creature in heaven worshipped Yeshua. So if you have a problem with ascribing worship to Yeshua, just go ahead and read Revelation chapter 5. All right. So maybe this is a good place.
Yeah. I know you want to get
leave off
early. We've already kept you long.
Yeah, I got a long trip tomorrow. But the next
Closing
thing that we
thoughts.
see, closing thoughts are, we'll leave off next time, pick up with the seals. So we're going to look at all the seals. The first 4 of the seals are known as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. These have already taken place a long time ago, and we're going to go through history in detail and see how they took place.
That's what I'm excited
And I think it will make sense.
Yes.
This is what Nate's been waiting for like months now.
Yes.
We'll finally talk about the Huns.
Yes.
Attila the Hun. So, we're going to see how he progressively opens each of these seals and play out the historicist interpretation and narrative of Revelation. Now that we can actually, it's like our intro. We just did the intro to Revelation.
So you want me to read 2,000 or 1,260 years of history for next week? Okay. Got it.
Yes, for next week. That's what we're going over. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. Any final thoughts from you, good sir?
Have you heard of Gedalia before? You were mentioned Nebuchadnezzar.
The coffee? That's Gedalia. Never mind.
He didn't want to destroy, like Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to destroy Jerusalem. It makes no sense. Like, why would you want to destroy it so much? Like, leave it desolate for 70 years. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you conquer something so you could, keep it as a vassal state so they pay taxes. But look into Gedalia. There's one answer for it. But you have an answer yourself, which is interesting. But check out Gedalia as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you,
It's not
Dr.
a coffee,
Klein.
it's a dude.
There's
a fast of Gedalia as well during the 10 days of awe. I think the 3rd day is the fast of Gedalia, remembering him. So,
all right. This is a fun episode. I enjoyed taking time to slow the pace down and chat a little bit. So that's good. For everybody out there watching, thanks for watching. Please, if you like this, make a comment, give us a like, go on YouTube, subscribe to Pharisee Heresy, and interact with us. We'd like to see if you have comments or questions that we can answer or try to answer or dive into as we explore this together.
Let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. Grab the tassel of the Pharisee on his way home to Zion. We came to hassle the papacy, and and the counterfeit kingdom. You say heresy, I stand where the water seas. Lux set in tenebrous, light shining in